In the village of Kahori, Bahati, a hard-working woman, struggled to make ends meet. She lived in a small, humble hut with her son, Tadua. Although they had enough to survive, the constant battle with poverty never stopped nagging at Bahati's mind. While most of the villagers accepted their simple lives, Bahati couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be more, a life full of luxury, fine clothes, and endless comforts. She dreamed of a better life, one where money wasn't an obstacle, and her son, Tadua, could live without worry. Tadua, a quiet and wise boy of 10, was different from most children. He wasn't interested in material things. Instead, he loved helping the elderly, tending to the crops, and always offered a kind word when someone was in need. The villagers adored him for his heart and his selflessness, but Bahati sometimes felt his kindness was a burden. She wanted more, but the only thing that tied her to her current life was her son. Every day, she looked at him and wondered if he could be the key to the better future she so desperately craved. One day, a strange man named Zubri entered their village. He was a traveling merchant, but there was something different about him. His clothes were fine, his voice smooth, and his eyes held an air of mystery. Rumors spread quickly that Zubri had once been a king, but now, he wandered from village to village, offering great riches in exchange for unusual trades. It didn't take long before Zubri found Bahati, and he saw the hunger in her eyes. He offered her an impossible deal, 1 year of her son's service in his household, and in return, a chest of gold, more than enough to change her life forever. Bahati felt her heart race. She asked, her voice trembling, "A chest of gold, for my son?" Zubri nodded, a smile playing on his lips. "Yes. 1 year. In my household, he will work, learn, and be cared for. When the year is over, he will return, well-fed, rich, and grateful." Bahati stood frozen, torn between her love for her son and the dream of wealth she could never quite reach. She thought of the house she could build, the clothes she could wear, and the life of ease that could be hers. She asked hesitantly, "But what about Tadua?" Knowing she couldn't take back the decision once made, Zubri's voice was calm and reassuring. "He will be cared for. I offer only the best. And when the year is over, he will return to you with riches beyond your imagination. Think of the life you could give him. Think of the future." Bahati felt the pull of temptation. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could she truly sacrifice her son for wealth? But then she thought of the hardships they had endured. Could 1 year really change everything? She whispered to herself. With a deep breath, Bahati made her decision. She would send her son with Zubri, believing that it was the only way to finally lift them from their life of struggle. She said, her voice barely above a whisper, "Take him, bring him back to me, rich and healthy. And I will thank you forever." Tadua, trusting as always, didn't question his mother. He smiled up at Bahati and said, "I'll be fine, Mama. I'll make you proud and I love you the most, Mama." But as the words left his lips, Bahati felt a knot in her stomach. She was giving away the one thing she loved more than anything, her son. Would she regret this? Or had she made the right choice for their future? Only time will tell her. As the days passed after Tadua's departure, Bahati's heart grew heavier. The weight of her decision began to settle in, but she refused to let herself turn back. Zubri's offer was too tempting, too perfect to ignore. She could already picture her life transformed, her small hut replaced by a grand home, her tattered clothes exchanged for fine fabrics, and her son, once again, at her side, but this time, richer than she had ever dreamed. But as she sat alone in the quiet of their small home, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Tadua, ever the trusting child, had no idea of the true cost of this decision. When Bahati had explained to him that he would go with Zubri, he had smiled, thinking it was just an adventure, a new opportunity for growth. He had said, his eyes filled with innocence, "I'll make you proud, Mama. I'm sure I'll learn so much. And I'll be back soon with treasures." Bahati watched him leave, her heart aching as he walked away with the merchant, but she told herself it was for the best. She whispered, her voice barely audible, "Be brave, my son. You are doing this for our future. For your future." That night, Bahati sat in the quiet darkness, the weight of her actions almost suffocating. The village around her slept, unaware of the life-changing decision she had just made. But one voice still echoed in her mind, Elder Baraka, a wise man who had lived through the ups and downs of life. He had seen the rise and fall of many fortunes in his time, and he knew the price of wealth. When Bahati had shared her decision with him earlier, he had looked at her with a deep, knowing gaze and warned her, "Wealth gained too easily brings a heavy burden. Beware of the merchant's promises. Not all that glitters is gold, Bahati. Sometimes the cost is far greater than the reward." But Bahati, too eager to escape the life of struggle, had dismissed his warning. "He's just an old man," she had told herself, shaking off the doubt. "Zubri's promise is real. This is my chance to finally change our fate." So, As the days turned into weeks, Bahati tried to convince herself that she had done the right thing. She knew in her heart that it wasn't easy to let go of her son, but the thought of the riches he would return with kept her going. With every passing day, she grew more convinced that wealth and happiness were just within reach. However, a sense of unease lingered. The villagers, always watchful, began to murmur behind her back. Why would she send her own son away? Some whispered, "What kind of mother does that?" But Bahati ignored them, her thoughts consumed by the images of what the gold would bring. The whispers didn't matter, she was on the path to something greater. One day, as she walked through the village, Elder Baraka stopped her again. He said, his voice soft but filled with concern, "I see the sadness in your eyes, Bahati. The price of wealth can be far more than what you expect." But Bahati, now more determined than ever, merely nodded. "I'll be fine. My son will return, and everything will change." And with that, she turned away, dismissing the elder's words once more. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. As the months passed, Bahati's life seemed to transform beyond her wildest dreams. She had built a larger home than any other in the village, with walls of sturdy wood and a roof that didn't leak during the rainy season. Her clothes were made of fine cloth, and she wore jewelry that sparkled in the sun. The villagers, once skeptical of her decision, now looked at her with envy. Whispers filled the air, some admiring her wealth, while others wondered what price she had truly paid. But no matter how much Bahati gained, something didn't feel right. Every night, when the village was silent and the stars shone brightly, Bahati would hear footsteps outside her door. It was always in the dead of night when no one should have been walking. She would rush to the window, only to find the world outside still and empty. Yet the footsteps continued, soft but constant like a shadow trailing her every move. Tadua's absence, once buried beneath her dreams of wealth, began to weigh on her soul like a stone. She found herself unable to sleep, her mind constantly replaying the last moments with her son. "I did it for him," she would tell herself over and over, but the words felt empty. No matter how much she decorated her home with riches, she could never escape the gnawing emptiness inside her. The wealth she had once longed for felt like dust in her hands. She had what she wanted, yet her joy was fading, slipping through her fingers like water. One afternoon, as Bahati sat in her grand home, staring at the wealth she had accumulated, there was a knock at the door. It was Jabari, a former friend from her village. His face was drawn, and his eyes held a sadness she hadn't seen before. "Jabari." Bahati greeted him, but there was no joy in her voice. "What brings you here?" Jabari stepped inside, his expression serious. He didn't waste any time. "I've been to the town where Zubri lives," he said quietly. "I've seen Tadua." Bahati's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, you've seen him?" she asked, her voice shaking. Jabari's face hardened as he spoke. "He's not living the life you imagined for him, Bahati. Tadua is working in a field, wearing rags, and toiling under the sun every day. He looks miserable, far from the child you thought would come back with riches. The boy you sent away, he's suffering." Bahati felt the ground slip from under her. Her knees went weak, and she had to steady herself against the wall. "No. It can't be true," she whispered, but the doubt in her voice betrayed her. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice filled with desperation. Jabari sighed deeply. "I tried, Bahati," he said, his tone filled with regret. "I knew you wouldn't listen. You were blinded by greed, by the promise of wealth. You didn't want to see the truth, and now you've lost him." The words struck Bahati like a bolt of lightning. She sank to the floor, her hands trembling. She thought of the gold, the house, the clothes, all the things she had believed would fill the void inside her. But now, all she could think of was Tadua, alone and suffering, and the cruel price of her choices. "I have to fix this," she whispered, but even she wasn't sure if it was too late. The footsteps continued that night, louder than ever, as if they were the echoes of her guilt chasing her down. Determined to right her wrongs, Bahati set out on a journey to find Zubri and bring Tadua home. Her heart was heavy with guilt, but she knew she had no choice. She walked through the dense forests, across dry plains, and over rocky hills, each step heavier than the last. The weight of her past decisions felt like a stone in her chest, and the thought of Tadua's suffering made her resolve even stronger. "I must bring him back," she kept whispering to herself. After days of travel, Bahati met Nia, an elderly woman who lived in a small, humble hut by a river. Nia was a healer, known for her wisdom and kind heart. She listened to Bahati's story and immediately saw the pain in her eyes. "You seek redemption, but the road is not an easy one," Nia warned. "Zubri is no ordinary merchant. He is a man with power, and that power is not one that can be taken lightly." Bahati frowned, confused. "What do you mean? He's just a merchant, isn't he?" Nia's eyes darkened as she spoke. Zubri was once a king, but he fell victim to his own greed. Now, he wanders from village to village, trading not in gold or spices, but in souls. If he chooses, he can trap a soul forever. And the worst part? He doesn't care about the lives he destroys to gain more power. The news sent a chill through Bahati. She had already given up her son for the promise of wealth, but she never imagined Zubri was capable of something so sinister. I have to stop him. I need to get Tatua back, Bahati said, her voice shaking with urgency. Nia nodded solemnly. You will need to be careful. Zubri is not someone you can confront without knowing the truth about him. His power is not just in gold, but in his ability to control those around him. As they continued their journey, Bahati and Nia arrived at a hidden village nestled deep in the forest. The village was quiet, its people speaking in hushed tones. It was here that they met Juma, a tall woman with a stern face, who had heard of Zubri's cruel dealings. Zubri has been trading children for years, Juma said, her voice low and fearful. He doesn't care about them. Once their service is done, he has no use for them. They disappear, and no one ever sees them again. Bahati's heart pounded in her chest as she heard Juma's words. What do you mean, disappear? What happens to them? She asked, barely able to breathe. Juma looked around nervously before answering. He takes them to a place, a dark, forgotten land, where they are trapped. He drains their spirit and keeps them for himself, using their energy to fuel his power. They are nothing more than tools to him. Once they've served their purpose, he lets them vanish into the void. Bahati's hands trembled. Tatua, my son, he's not just working in a field. He's been trapped. The realization hit her like a wave, and she almost collapsed in shock. I made the biggest mistake of my life, she whispered, her voice breaking. Nia placed a comforting hand on Bahati's shoulder. We can still save him. But you must be prepared. Zubri won't let him go easily. Bahati took a deep breath, her mind filled with fear and determination. I will save him, no matter the cost. The journey had already cost her everything, her peace of mind, her happiness, but the thought of losing Tatua forever was something she couldn't bear. She had to face Zubri, no matter what darkness lay ahead. After days of searching, Bahati and Nia finally found Zubri's mansion, hidden deep within the heart of the forest. The mansion was dark and foreboding, its walls covered in creeping vines, as if nature itself was trying to claim it back. Bahati's heart raced as she approached, the weight of her guilt and desperation heavy in her chest. Inside, the atmosphere was cold, and she could hear the sound of footsteps echoing through the large, empty hallways. Bahati's eyes scanned the room, and there, in the corner, she saw him, Tatua. He was bent over, scrubbing the floor, his clothes ragged and worn. His eyes were distant, as if life had been drained from him. Bahati's breath caught in her throat as she rushed forward, calling out his name, Tatua. Tatua, it's me, Mama. She cried, her voice breaking. Tatua looked up, but there was no recognition in his eyes. His face was empty, as if he didn't even remember who she was. Mama. He whispered, as though the word was foreign to him. Who are you? Bahati's heart shattered. It's me, my son. Don't you remember? But Tatua only shook his head, his eyes vacant, as though he was trapped in a world of his own. Bahati turned to Zubri, who had been watching quietly from the shadows. You took my son under false promises. Bahati shouted, her voice trembling with anger and pain. You tricked me. You promised he would return, that he would be safe. Zubri stepped forward, his smile cold and uncaring. I made no promises, he said in a low, calm voice. I simply showed you the path you wanted. You chose it, Bahati. You chose wealth over your own flesh and blood. Bahati's mind reeled as she realized the truth. All this time, she had been deceived. You never intended to give him back, did you? She asked, her voice shaking with the realization of what she had done. Nia stepped forward, her eyes filled with sorrow for Bahati's pain. Zubri has never given back a child, she said, her voice filled with quiet fury. His greed feeds on their spirits. He has no intention of letting Tatua go. He traps them, draining their souls to fuel his power. Once a child is his, they are nothing but tools for his endless hunger. Bahati's breath caught in her throat. She had sold her son for the promise of wealth, and now, she could see the full extent of Zubri's cruelty. You monster! She screamed, her eyes wild with fury. You will not keep my son. I'll take him back, even if it costs me everything. Zubri only smiled, his eyes gleaming with cold amusement. You cannot stop me. I am beyond your reach, beyond the laws of your village, beyond your understanding. Your son belongs to me now, and nothing you do will change that. But Bahati, her heart filled with the love only a mother could have for her child, was not afraid. She took a deep breath and walked toward Tatua, her hands shaking but steady. She knelt down before him, her voice soft but filled with emotion. Tadawa, remember me. Remember who I am. Remember your mother who loves you more than anything. I know I made a terrible mistake, but I will never give up on you. Please, come back to me. Tadawa blinked, as though something was stirring inside him. His eyes flickered for a moment, a sign of recognition. Mama. He whispered again, his voice weak but growing stronger. Mama. I remember. Tears welled up in Bahati's eyes. She held him tightly, feeling the weight of the years of regret and pain in that single moment. But she knew that love was the key. Only true love could break the spell Zubri had placed on her son. You're not alone anymore, Tadawa. I will always be here. Always. Her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. She had come so far, and now, she would do whatever it took to save her son. Zubri towered over her, his eyes filled with cruel amusement, as though he were the master of the world and Bahati's sacrifice was nothing more than a mere game. You think you can win this battle? Zubri sneered. You think love can defeat me? I've taken your son, and you can't change that. You're nothing but a foolish woman chasing after something you will never have. Bahati's heart ached with the weight of her mistakes, but she knew that the love she had for Tadawa was stronger than anything Zubri could ever offer. She stepped closer to him, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Take my wealth, take my life, but let my son go free. I've realized now that all the gold and riches in the world mean nothing without him. He's my heart. He's everything. Zubri's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in his gaze. You offer everything? He asked, his voice dropping low, as though he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Yes, Bahati replied, her voice unwavering. Everything I have, my house, my future, all my wealth, I would trade it all for his freedom. My love for him is worth more than anything you can take from me. There was a moment of silence. Zubri stood frozen, staring at Bahati, as though her words had pierced through the darkness he had built around himself. For the first time, his power seemed to waver, like a flickering flame about to go out. The mansion around them seemed to hold its breath, and Tadawa's eyes, once vacant and lost, began to show signs of life. Bahati held her breath, praying that her sacrifice would be enough. Please, Zubri, she whispered, let him go. My love for him is stronger than any curse you've placed on him. Zubri hesitated, his face twisted in a mix of confusion and anger. You dare defy me, he growled, but Bahati didn't flinch. She was no longer afraid. In that moment, a surge of light seemed to fill the room. The darkness that had clung to Zubri's mansion began to dissipate, as if Bahati's selflessness had shattered the hold Zubri had over them all. Zubri took a step back, his hands trembling, as though he could feel the power draining from him. Bahati's heart soared as she saw Tadawa's eyes clear and his face soften, the curse slowly lifting from his soul. Mama. He whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Mama, is it really you? Yes, my son, Bahati cried, tears streaming down her face. I'm here, and I will never let you go again. Zubri, his power now completely broken, looked at them both with a mixture of fury and disbelief. For the first time, he understood the true strength of a mother's love. The greed that had consumed him all these years faltered in the face of Bahati's sacrifice. You would give up everything for him, he muttered, as if the idea was too much for him to grasp. Bahati nodded. Yes, because true wealth isn't gold, Zubri. It's love. It's family. And I would trade it all to see my son free. Zubri took one last look at them, his face twisting in bitterness and regret. But he knew that nothing could hold them back now. The power he had held over Tadawa and Bahati had crumbled in the face of a mother's unwavering devotion. Go then, he spat, leave. But know this, there's no coming back from this. You've broken me. With that, Zubri disappeared into the shadows, his form fading into the darkness that had once been his home. The mansion seemed to collapse in on itself, the walls cracking and crumbling as though it had never truly existed. Bahati turned to Tadawa, her son now free from Zubri's grasp. She pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly as if she would never let go again. I'm sorry, my dear, she whispered. I'm so sorry for what I did. But I will spend every day of my life making it right. Tadawa smiled up at her, his eyes filled with love. You don't have to apologize, Mama. I'm just glad to be home. And so, they left the crumbling mansion behind, walking together into the light of a new day. They knew their journey had been long and difficult, but the greatest lesson had been learned. Love was the most powerful force in the world, and with it, anything was possible. Bahati and Tadawa returned to Kahori, their hearts full and spirits healed. The villagers, once distant, now embraced them with warmth and respect, recognizing the strength of Bahati's love. Though she had lost her wealth, Bahati had found something far more precious, her son's affection and the trust of her community. Tadawa, wise beyond his years, grew into a compassionate leader, and Bahati, the mother of wisdom, shared her story with the village. Her words echoed in every corner. True wealth is not found in gold, but in the love and kindness we share. And with that, the village flourished, rich in love and unity, forever guided by Bahati's lesson. If you like the video, then please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button also.